Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Deciphered right here on the CryptoCast Network. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for joining us yet again. We have a great show for you guys to talk about. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin, Lightning Network, all sorts of good stuff. But before we get into that, we are screen sharing our website at CryptoCast.network, where you can find our YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, RSS and iTunes links. For those that don't want to watch the YouTube, we do have an audio stream link for you guys available, and we are sharing our shirts here, our merchandise. You guys can check that out to support the channel, and of course our QR code at the bottom, as this is a a community-supported YouTube channel, and we really appreciate all the feedback and donations we can get. And we also have the super chat turned on, so you guys can give us tips and ask us questions that way. We really, again, appreciate that. So with that aside, let's go ahead and get into the interview today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking with Mr. Trey Griffith, the CEO and founder of Sparkswap. Trey, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, man, really appreciate you coming on. For those that are new to the channel, we ask that you hit the subscribe button. And then if you guys are liking the show or like our shows, we just ask that you hit the thumbs up. And if you guys are audio listening with the audio, we really appreciate a review on iTunes. So we're going to have a great show today, Trey. Listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I want to get into a lot of good stuff here, Bitcoin, Lightning Network. But first, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit about Sparkswap. So first, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So, I started Sparkswap. We incorporated in February of this year. Before this, I was working at BlackRock. I was actually working at BlackRock's robo-advisor called Future Advisor, where I ran the team that did integrations with pretty large financial institutions here in the U.S. I started working on Sparkswap because I sort of personally had owned Bitcoin and some other cryptocurrencies, and was pretty interested in this space. But really working with some of the major financial institutions in the US, I really kind of discovered firsthand the way the financial infrastructure works, and how much it's reliant on people and institutions that I think can be just improved through technology. And I think kind of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency gives us an opportunity to build a more open, more inclusive financial system, and one that's sort of less reliant on these institutions. So I started just working on projects in the space to see what I could do to try to further that agenda.
Awesome, Trey. Really great to hear. Sounds like your heart is in the right place there, trying to make the world a better place, right? That's what we're trying to do, leave it better than the way we found it. So Trey, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Sparkswap, the history there, why you guys decided to start this company.
Sure. So Sparkswap is a non-custodial cryptocurrency exchange, or a way to trade cryptocurrency without depositing your assets with a custodial exchange like Poloniex or Binance. We started it, I started getting interested in on-chain swaps initially, because it's kind of seemed a little bit silly to me that in this world of kind of, self-sovereign currency, self-sovereign assets, that to actually trade those assets, you had to give up access to them. You had to give up ownership to an exchange. And so I started looking at the state of the art for how to exchange, how to trade without having to put those assets at risk, without having to put those assets in someone else's control. And really, the state of the world, and this was in, late 2017, was pretty bad as far as how you can trade currencies, even Bitcoin, without giving up control to somebody else. And so there's some interesting projects out there, mostly focused on, slow transfers, things like BISC, which was BitSquare back when I was first getting started, and some other interesting projects. But, I really didn't think that there was a good technology solution for a trustless, non-custodial exchange of currencies. So I started working on-chain swaps originally. Pretty quickly found the limitations of those in terms of speed. And the speed problem with on-chain swaps is not just that it takes a long time to settle. It's that in a fast-moving market with moving prices, the market never really forms. People just back out of the trade before it actually settles. And because it's atomic, it's like no trades are happening unless they're really big. And that's when I started looking at the Lightning Network as kind of an alternative to be able to do a similar type of transaction, but at a speed that would make it sort of comparable with a centralized exchange. And so Sparkswap is, it functions basically like an exchange, but the trades are happening, the trades are being settled by Lightning Network atomic swap. So you get to trade cross-chain. So you can trade right now Bitcoin with Litecoin, and the trades settle in about a second, which is pretty comparable with some of the leading centralized exchanges that are out there. And so with those two kind of benefits, you get something that you really can't get anywhere else today. There's really no one out there that's providing cross-chain fast settlement without having custody of the assets. So that's what we're trying to build.
Very, very interesting. So before we get too deep into Sparkswap, I want to get maybe some of the differences of some of the other things that are out there. So maybe you can tell us a little bit of the main differences between something like this and BISC, right? Because BISC is more decentralized. This is more, it's still, non-custodian and trustless, but it is centralized. So maybe you can tell us some of the differences there about what sets apart you guys and BISC.
Yeah, BISC is actually, personally, I think one of my favorite projects out there in the space. And so, I wouldn't have started working on this if I thought there wasn't sort of something different that we could bring to the table that BISC wasn't already doing. But, BISC, I think they would be the first to tell you that what they're trying to do is really make a kind of really decentralized fiat on-ramp, but it's really kind of ideal for smaller amounts, kind of individual users using kind of retail banking methods. And the settlement method of those trades is fairly slow, because it uses kind of the retail banking infrastructure. And they have kind of the arbiter in the middle that makes sure everything's fair. The settlement times on those trades, is in kind of hours at the least, and could potentially be much longer than that. So what we're trying to do is, by sort of taking away the requirement to support fiat currencies, by just supporting cryptocurrencies and by using some new technology, we think that we can provide kind of a similar type of experience to BISC in terms of not having to give custody up of your assets, but being able to trade and settle those trades in much larger amounts and at much higher speed. So being able to settle trades in a second versus hours is a really important feature if you're actually talking about trading, actually like trading for profit. And really, I think what it comes down to for me, especially on the centralization aspect, is there's always a trade-off between decentralization and kind of latency. And when you're talking about latency in a market, you're talking about a sort of less efficient price discovery. And so, we think that there's sort of a good trade-off to be made, at least right now, in giving people control of their assets, not taking custody, but still having really efficient price discovery so that people are getting really good prices when they do trade.
Great, fantastic descriptions here. So have you got a chance to see Vaultoro at all, maybe? The company that does, trading gold for Bitcoin and their Glassbook solution. I think it's similar to what you have where the order books is centralized, right? And make sure to be very fast and from you guys, but it's the trades that are decentralized that run over the top of that settle over the top of the Lightning Network.
I have not looked at Vaultoro. I'll take a look at that though.
Okay, very cool. So maybe you can tell us maybe some of the differences between this solution and maybe Blockstream's new recently launched Liquid sidechain.
Yeah, so Liquid's pretty interesting. I think Liquid is it's a federation, and so the kind of sidechain is controlled by the members of the federation. So you have to, if you want your assets represented on that chain, you have to trust the members of the federation. So it's certainly an improvement over, giving all of your assets to maybe one of those members of the federation. But and I think there's certainly some improvements in terms of security. But it's really a different story when you're talking about something like the Lightning Network, where it's a completely trustless transfer mechanism. So you as a user don't have to trust any members of any federation anywhere. You just have to trust the sort of code of the Lightning Network and Bitcoin in general in order to trust that your assets are actually yours. So I'd say that's kind of the primary difference. Also, when you look at something like Liquid, it's really for transferring assets between custodial exchanges, which I think is a super valuable use case. I think there's a big need for that, but we're trying to do something a little bit different, which is kind of replace the kind of concept of a custodial exchange entirely with one that is non-custodial using this type of new transfer method.
Absolutely. And so that's a great difference. This is more for the retail, right? This is for the public, where Liquid is more for like maybe market makers and larger participants in the space.
I wouldn't say it's for retail. Certainly, at least in its current state, the the system requirements that are needed, actually taking control of your own currency, especially in a hot wallet, which Sparkswap currently requires a certain level of care and resources that most retail users don't have. So I wouldn't say we're more for retail. I just mean more that, we're trying to build a kind of a market unto itself, rather than kind of transferring between markets, which is kind of more, at least the way I've seen advertised for Liquid. So yeah, it's a slightly different use case, maybe a slightly different customer too. But I think it's mostly about this slightly different use case for it, as well as kind of the trust that's required as far as the custody of assets.
Very, very cool. So it's really important to remind people of the trade-offs. There's always going to be, some kind of trade-offs, and Liquid has trade-offs. You guys have trade-offs, Bisq has trade-offs. So, just very important to understand that, because, people want everything, right? They want the trilemma solved. They want it right now. They want everything decentralized and zero MS and all that good stuff. So this does seem, though, to bring some of the best of the both worlds. This solution that you guys have here, you say, Sparkswap is the first cryptocurrency exchange built on the Lightning Network. Now you can trade Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in seconds without depositing assets with a third party. So, you say trade cryptocurrency without counterparty risk. So maybe you can get into some of the traditional issues that we have to face that this solves, something like asset loss, frozen assets, delayed withdrawals, this type of stuff. Maybe you can get into a little bit about that, the traditional issues.
Yeah. So, I mean, the kind of the big players in the space are all still big centralized custodial exchanges, people like Binance, Poloniex. And in order to trade on those exchanges, even though they don't support banking relationships, they don't actually support kind of direct connection to fiat currency. To trade on something like Poloniex, you have to deposit your Bitcoin onto Poloniex, and it goes into Poloniex' wallet, and they have full control of it. Now, once it's in there, you can trade settle really quickly. But then you don't get your new currency back until you actually withdraw from Poloniex. For the entire time that you're trading, Poloniex has full control of your Bitcoin or whatever other assets you've deposited or traded for. And the problem with that is that means that Poloniex, if their security practices aren't great, they can get your assets stolen. We've seen that happen. I think over $1.5 billion have been stolen from cryptocurrency exchanges this year. So this is not just Mt. Gox. This goes far beyond Mt. Gox. If Poloniex is not in your jurisdiction, those assets might be seized by a local government. We saw with the exchanges in China getting shut down a little over a year ago, there was a lot of issues with people getting their assets out of those exchanges. And then, there's also just sort of like operational issues. I think if you go on any sort of message board or Telegram group, there's always traders complaining about, withdrawals from exchanges being delayed, or, it's months and I haven't had a support ticket answered, which is, just sort of bad in terms of trust of traders, but also, can have very real impacts in terms of income generation if that's what you rely on to generate your income. So, we think that those are pretty real problems that exist with the current world, but to date, there haven't been really good solutions for it. The kind of solutions that are out there today to solve this problem, like we already talked about, are either really slow, so aren't really good for actually like live trading. They're more good for kind of over-the-counter types of transactions, or they require you to maybe only trade the assets of one blockchain. So like, for blockchains like Ethereum that have native assets issued on them, that's kind of a limitation of the existing solutions. Or they require that, your Bitcoin, quote unquote, is represented by another token on that blockchain. So, Stellar has a DEX, but the Bitcoin on Stellar is actually kind of issued by a trusted third party. This is, we think, the first way to actually be able to hold on to your private keys, so you don't actually have to give up control of your assets, but still be able to trade cross-blockchain, so being able to trade Bitcoin for other currencies, and have those trades settle, nearly instantly. It's kind of slow compared to the traditional finance world. Our trades right now are settling in around a second. But compared to the existing centralized cryptocurrency exchanges, that's pretty fast. That's pretty comparable with kind of the major exchanges that are out there. So we think that this is a real alternative to the major centralized exchanges, and can hopefully kind of bring a lot of people over, both the really big players all the way down to eventually kind of retail users onto a better kind of more what I would call Bitcoin native way to trade cryptocurrency.
Awesome. Great descriptions. We do have a question from the chat. He says, how does the order book not get attacked with fake orders?
Yeah, so the way we handle that right now is we have, when you put up an order, you actually have to put down a deposit that's a percentage of the order. We'll play with that size of that deposit, but it prevents people from putting up fake orders that they don't intend to have filled, and so that deposit gets returned as soon as the order is completed. That does create some amount of custodial risk. It's obviously much smaller than giving up the entirety of your position, but it's kind of the best solution that we have right now without kind of having a long-lived reputation system that's tied to real-world identity. So we're always going to be looking for ways to kind of improve that system, but at least with what we're launching, what we've got on testnet right now and what we'll be launching with on mainnet, that's probably what we're going to do, is just use a deposit system to kind of enforce good behavior on the order book.
Very interesting, very interesting. And it's just really great to see you guys, people like yourself thinking about these types of solutions. Again, trying to build out something that is the best of both worlds. That is, non-custodial, trustless, but still fast. And obviously, we know that for efficiency, there is no greater efficiency than centralization. We've seen this is how we scale things when it comes to these types of solutions. So that is very
actually, when I started on this project, like I said, I started with on-chain swaps, and when I started looking at Lightning as well, I started looking at if there's a way to build a decentralized order book, and I think there's some good kind of middle ground solutions that I still think one day we'll try to solve. But you're absolutely right that there's kind of an inherent trade-off between the speed that you're going to be able to get and then the centralization of the order book. So, I think what we're doing right now is we're trying to kind of like push the field forward, and then over time be able to give people, even more solutions that gives them the comfort level they want in terms of a trade-off between centralization and speed.
Absolutely great. Awesome. So one more question from the chat here. And I think I know the answer to this after looking over some of your documentation, but will other assets be supported besides just BTC?
Yeah, so I mean, right now it supports Bitcoin and Litecoin, so you can trade between Bitcoin and Litecoin. When we think about adding assets, and obviously we're going to add many more assets than that. When we think about adding assets, it's really a combination of kind of technology readiness and then trading volume. So Bitcoin and Litecoin are both obviously very well supported on the Lightning Network, probably the best supported two currencies. It was built originally for Bitcoin, and Litecoin is very similar. And they both also have really good trading volume. So, the Bitcoin Litecoin trading pair is actually one of the, top trading pairs in terms of cryptocurrency to cryptocurrency. So that's why we're starting there. But we will add other currencies. We'll work to add things like, Ethereum. There's a lot of interesting assets that are issued on top of Ethereum. Ethereum and Bitcoin is a huge trading pair itself. And then we'll add others as well. Like I said, as a combination of the technology becoming available, whether it's Lightning Network or other similar payment channel networks, and then trading volume, especially trading volume with Bitcoin.
So yeah, I was going to ask, how would you get Ethereum if Ethereum doesn't support the Lightning Network? But I would assume you would use whatever solution Ethereum has to kind of sort of combine or somehow. I guess it wouldn't be trustlessly swapped then, unless it would support that.
The kind of architecture that we've built is that any kind of payment channel network. So there's kind of, when people talk about the Lightning Network, there's kind of two things. One is the Lightning Network as this concept of a network of payment channels with multi-hop payments, and then the other is maybe sort of like capital L Lightning Network, which is a network that adheres to the specifications outlined in the bolts, the basics of Lightning technology, which is what Eclair, C Lightning, and LND all follow. But there are other payment channel networks that are really similar to Lightning, but maybe don't follow that specification exactly. So, Raiden is one of those. It's a payment channel network for Ethereum. There are some other networks that are in development for other currencies that are, probably won't follow the Bolt specifications exactly, but are sort of close enough that we can interoperate with them. So, obviously the choice of network is important. You want to make sure it's stable. You want to make sure it can support the volume that we have, and you want to make sure it's trustless. But as long as it can support kind of a similar architecture as the Lightning Network, we can integrate it, and using that support a swap between something like Bitcoin and Ethereum, for example. So there's a lot of options for us as we go down the road.
Very interesting. So right now, though, it supports mainly just things that support the Lightning Network standard, which of course is Bitcoin and Litecoin.
Yep.
And yeah, it's interesting to see down the future. Do you think that there'll be some kind of like ILP protocol that interops with all of with Lightning, Raiden, and everything else, or do you see more of a Lightning kind of wins all territory where everybody will just have to sort of support Lightning as the interoperable layer between these chains?
It's an interesting question. I think part of that depends on how Lightning evolves. Right now Lightning is very focused on Bitcoin, as it should be. That's sort of the primary use case, and I think everyone, most of the people in that community, are really focused on getting the protocol ready as a payments network, which I think is good. But I think over time, if there are some, if there's sort of openness and flexibility to make Lightning kind of the single interoperable protocol, I think then it would probably win. I don't think anybody out there is really itching to design their own protocols if they don't have to. But even if Lightning doesn't, we could see kind of another kind of overarching protocol, or even kind of ad hoc solutions like we've built. I think we'll kind of be fine for the time being, and then we'll kind of figure it out down the road what's going to be the way that we link a bunch of these different blockchains together.
Yeah, I guess as always, we'll let the free market choose, right?
Exactly.
And because I mean, protocol development, people just don't understand how hard this is. That's why I think that I sort of own the theory that Lightning will sort of be that interoperable layer where everybody will essentially capitulate, because nobody wants to create or can have the ability to create a better solution than Lightning.
And I think even the solutions that are not like exactly compatible with Lightning will be sort of like 75% compatible, because there's just no reason, there's a lot of thought and effort that's gone into making this protocol, and a lot of like lessons that have been learned along the way. And so I think people are eager to kind of build on top of that and make it, work for a specific blockchain rather than, reinventing the wheel.
Great answer. So currently you guys are LND. If that's right. Could you tell us maybe a little bit the thought about why you guys chose that, for example, instead of C Lightning or Eclair?
Yeah. So LND we chose primarily because, especially at the time we started working on it, and I think still to this day, it was kind of the most feature rich. It had kind of more built out, has a very active community, and it supported kind of a lot of what we wanted to do. Since then, C Lightning has undergone a rewrite, and I know some people that are very high on C Lightning, so we'll take a look at that as well. Eclair, as far as I can tell, and I don't want to speak for the Eclair developers, but it seems sort of less focused on back-end applications like we're building, and more kind of on end-user applications. I think their mobile app is like the most popular Lightning app that there is. So really for us, like those are the choices that we have right now, and we'll always look at we always kind of reevaluate all of our technology choices, including our Lightning Network implementation, to see if now that C Lightning has been rewritten, if that makes more sense for us. And as more people kind of like, I'm sure we'll see more Lightning implementations over the years, and so we'll evaluate those as we see them and make sure that we're still making the right choice. But at least for right now, we're really happy with LND, really happy with the community, and it's getting the job done for us right now.
Vortex implementation incoming soon.
I hope so.
No. So getting back to questions about the exchange itself. So are you guys, because this is somewhat decentralized, at least some of the trades and stuff are going over the Lightning Network. So will you guys KYC AML, and like how do you feel about that in general, going into this new world of this trustless world?
So that's a really good question. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're on testnet right now and not on mainnet. Is that's an important topic to get right. And I think we've seen some pretty high profile cases of people who were previously kind of adamant about a particular position with regards to KYC AML, reversing it. So for us, we want to make sure that's something we get right. I don't really have an answer right now, unfortunately, for what we're going to do, other than to say I believe in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a way to make the system more open. And so I want to do everything I can to do that, but also recognize that I live in the US and I like living here. And so it's important for us to make sure that we follow kind of all the laws and regulations that are applicable to us.
Okay, good answer. Good answer. There's not much really, we can do if you are going to be in the U.S. And if you grow large enough, obviously, at some point, Uncle Sam's going to knock on the door and ask for that AML report. So interesting. Okay, so let me just let's move on to the next part here. I am screen sharing a part of the website where you kind of describe the main issues here. We got never share. You guys never share the private keys. You guys settle trades instantly, and you have this trade cross blockchain. So if we could just maybe go a little bit more detail into each one of these, that would
Sure.
be great. So let's start out with the non-custodial part, how that works, and how you guys are doing that, and then we'll go into the settling trades instantly, and then the trade cross blockchain, and then I'd like to get to a demo after that.
Sure. Yeah. So, in terms of private keys, today to use Sparkswap, you have to download a piece of software that we've built that's called the broker. And bundled with the broker is LND, as we mentioned. And so LND has within it a Bitcoin wallet in one case, a Litecoin wallet in the other case. And so when you use Sparkswap, what you're doing is depositing your Bitcoin or Litecoin into the wallet that's on hardware you control. So you run Sparkswap, which includes LND, on a machine you control. That's going to create a wallet with a key that never leaves that machine, and you deposit onto that wallet. So you never have to share your private keys with anyone. To actually trade on the exchange, what you have to do is open payment channels. So open Lightning Network channels with the rest of the network. And you never have to share your private keys to do that. But at the same time, you have the ability to then send your assets across that channel. So you never lose control of your private keys, never have to share them with anyone. They're always on a machine that you control. But you still have the ability to interact with the exchange.
Awesome, awesome. So let's move on to the settled trades instantly.
Yeah, so the sort of key here is Lightning Network atomic swaps as a way to settle trades. So as soon as you match with another user and you want to trade, Bitcoin for Litecoin, it's a single transaction that sends, your Bitcoin to them and their Litecoin to you. And because it's using a Lightning Network atomic swap, that transaction is extremely fast. It's something like a second. It's just a series of, basically RPC calls rather than having kind of the global consensus of something like Bitcoin, because it's traveling over those payment channels. So as a result, you can settle the trade, as soon as the trade executes and you're matched, you can settle the trade. Like I said, in our test so far, it's been right about a second.
Awesome. Only a second. That is pretty impressive again, guys, for using the Lightning Network. And that I believe will of course be optimized and increased over time as, technology gets better, as Lightning Network itself matures, and of course the routing gets better. It's interesting. Some people think the Lightning Network is completely vaporware, yet here you guys are, of course, building an entire business over the top of it, using Lightning Network transactions every single day. But I believe that, right now it's they haven't even attempted to sort of begin the routing, working on the routing. Right now, it's just a very, very uses autopilot, which is just a very great first attempt, right? And it gets the job done for now. But I believe that you would agree that Lightning Network, once it's attempted to get to that part, because they haven't. It's so funny, protocol development is hard and it takes a long time. But what we're working on for the most part is just the basics part, right? They haven't even got to the routing. So once they get to the routing, would you agree that once they actually get to the routing, that's where it's going to really start getting interesting to optimize speed for channels?
And so for us, we kind of because we kind of have our own network, we can kind of skip a lot of the routing problems that plague the rest of the Lightning Network right now. So we kind of have specific paths that people should use to do their trades. But I totally agree. Routing's an issue on the Lightning Network today, but it's an issue for good reason, which is that routing is a difficult problem while trying to maintain privacy and while trying to maintain not giving up ownership of your assets. So routing is a challenging problem. There's a lot of really smart people working on it. And so I do think routing is going to improve significantly over the next 12, 24 months. And when it does, that will just make the sort of reliability of payments on the Lightning Network much better, and will allow people like us that right now are kind of have pre-built routes to be able to use more of the network when we talk about pathfinding and routes.
It's disadoption, Trey. It's disadoption. That's what the famous saying by Rick Faulkner there on the commenting on the increase of SegWit usage. He says it's disadoption, but that's always kind of funny. So very, very great comments, Trey. I guess I'm with you, man. Well, over the next 12 to 24 months, I believe we're going to see massive improvements and maturity in Lightning Network. And I say it takes time, but it's all about relative, right? Like for me, a couple of years in protocol development is not that much time. It's a little bit of time. It's a nice little chunk of time to get maybe one or two features really, really right, and that's great. But for some people, that's an eternity, like 24 months.
Well, in Bitcoin, it is. I mean, Bitcoin's only been around for 10 years, so I guess 2 years in Bitcoin time is pretty long.
Yeah, I guess it is. It all depends on your time preference, people. Remember, value your wealth in Bitcoin, and have a high time preference. I can never remember which one is better, high or low. To be able to, the outlook to think long term. I don't remember if that was high or low, but time preference. But it's in Safety's book, of course, and I highly recommend everybody check out that the Bitcoin Standard. Okay, very, very cool. So let us get to the final one here, which is the trade cross blockchain. So we've talked about the non-custodial part, the settling over Lightning, and then now let's talk about the trading cross blockchain compatible with highly liquid trading pairs like BTC, LTC.
Yeah, so I mean, this is really kind of one of the reasons why we started working on this to begin with is being able to trade Bitcoin means being able to trade across different blockchains, so trade from Bitcoin to another blockchain. And because we use kind of a layer 2 solution like Lightning, we're not tied to a specific underlying blockchain, and we can build a transaction that includes Bitcoin and Litecoin without having to have any special other interoperability. We just use the same type of transaction for both blockchains. They're tied together through a single hash, and that lets you trade between Bitcoin and Litecoin fairly seamlessly. Now, there's a lot of kind of underlying technology work that goes into making that available, which is why we can't just immediately turn on a ton of other trading pairs. But because sort of at a fundamental level, there's no reason why we can't trade between Bitcoin and Ethereum or Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. So that's why we're excited about this technology.
Very, very interesting. Okay, great. So we went over that. Let's get maybe a demo going here. I'll have you share your screen for the audio listeners. Of course, we'll describe what's going on and everything. But pretty excited to see this, guys. We're going to do a little bit of a demo of how the platform works, and we'll let Trey take it away.
Yeah. So this is just a demo of a swap on testnet. So what you see here is two different machines. So on the left, we have, Alice, machine A, and on the right, in the middle, we have Bob, which is, sort of machine B. And each of these is a separate Sparkswap node. They each have their own BTC and LTC LND nodes. And then on the right, we're just looking at a live view of kind of the Sparkswap order book. So you can see here at the beginning that, Alice has, a fair amount of Bitcoin committed and, a fair amount of Bitcoin committed and not very much Litecoin. And Bob has the reverse. He's got some Litecoin, but not very much Bitcoin. And so if we have Bob here actually buy in the market, you can see his order show up on the order book, and that speed is largely because it's a centralized order book. And then if we see Alice actually sell in the market, those two orders are going to get matched up. And so what's just happened here is these two users, Alice and Bob, have gotten matched up. And to settle the trade, we actually do an atomic swap on the Lightning Network between Bitcoin and Litecoin. So you can see here that Bob's balance of Litecoin has gone down a little bit. His Bitcoin balance has gone up a little bit. And the reverse is true for Alice, where she now has a little bit less Bitcoin and a little bit more Litecoin. So that happened. I was pausing it there just so we could talk about it. That whole transaction happens in about a second from them getting matched up to when it actually settles the trade on the Lightning Network. And now for both of these users, those funds are in their channels, but they're in their complete control. So as soon as they want to withdraw those funds, they can just close the channel. In most cases, that's going to take a couple confirmations on the blockchain. In the worst case, it's going to take a couple of days if there's sort of a contested close of the channel. But in no case are they sort of in danger of losing those assets. So they're in their complete control the whole time.
Very interesting. Great demo. For the audio listeners, I highly recommend you guys come back and check this out. This is really cool. A quick little demo of showing just how fast that you can actually transfer between. So very, very cool. Trey, let's, I think I want to talk a little bit about your API and how you guys are working with developers. Maybe you can sort of talk just a little bit in general about how you guys plan to support developers and then working with this platform.
Yeah. So, and I mean, you saw in that demo that it was really a command line interface, and you can see on our website, we show a command line interface. And really that's because, we think about our product as primarily an API. We have open source software in the broker that has all of the code related to controlling your assets and doing the swaps. And that's what you run on your own machine. And that exposes an RPC, which we have in a fairly well documented API. And we expect most of our users to kind of interact with the product through that API by, people that build their own trading tools, being able to integrate with this as an alternative trading platform. We'll also do some work, integrating with existing trading tools. We've got some work going on right now to actually integrate with one of the most popular trading libraries. So, we expect most of our users to kind of, at least right now, interact with the product through that API. So, we're always looking for feedback on the API, make sure that it actually does what people want it to do. And eventually, we think over time, either us or other people in the community will build better tools to make it, more usable for kind of a more retail end user audience. But right now, it's really meant for people who kind of write code or use pretty advanced trading tools.
Excellent, excellent. So maybe you can talk a little bit about which parts of the platform you guys are open sourcing, because I do see you guys have a GitHub
Yep.
repo. So why don't you speak a little bit about what you guys actually have open source here?
Yeah, so the biggest piece that's open source is what we call the broker, which, as I mentioned, is that's the main piece of software that users run on their machine, and so that piece of software is what's going to interact with the order book, what's going to actually execute the swaps, and really kind of keep everything running for the user. Now, bundled with the broker is a version of LND that's slightly modified for both Bitcoin and Litecoin. And then we have another piece of open source software that's really just a translation layer between the broker and LND, so that we can more easily support, kind of other Lightning implementations, especially when we start talking about kind of other currencies. So those are kind of the main pieces of open source software. We of course have a ton of other, small tools and everything, but the broker is really kind of the big piece that people should be looking at and really thinking about when it comes to, okay, I'm going to run this on my machine. It's going to be responsible for keeping my keys safe and for running trades for me. So this is really the piece of software that we spend the most time on and that users are going to interact with the most.
Very, very cool. So that's important. I think that's a really important part to open source. Obviously, you can't open source all the secret sauce, but the main application that you use to interact with the trades. I mean, that's just really fantastic to open source, because of course you're going to get amazing feedback. You're going to get a lot better improvement back from the community, and I think that'll be actually a great competitive advantage. So maybe you could talk about that. The CCXT, is that what you're talking about? Is the layer in between?
So CCXT is actually a really popular library for trading on, probably about 100 different cryptocurrency exchanges, primarily centralized exchanges. And so that's a project we're doing right now to integrate Sparkswap into CCXT, so that people who, use CCXT to trade today can have kind of a non-custodial option where they can trade, Bitcoin for Litecoin without having to, build a brand new integration. So, it's got a ton of users. I think it's got something like 5,000 stars on GitHub or something like that, and supports 100 currency exchanges, including most of the major ones. So we've heard feedback from some of our users that maybe don't want to build an integration themselves. This would be a really good way for them to get started. So that's what we've been working on the past couple weeks, and hopefully we'll get our integration with them merged here pretty soon, and people will be able to use that.
Yeah, interesting. It looks like they support pretty much everything.
Hmm.
that you could ever need. All the major exchanges here: Binance, Bitfinex, Bittrex, Kraken. Very, very cool. I actually didn't even know, but I think I've heard about this API in passing. But this is just great. Is this open source entirely? This CCXT, or do they
Yeah.
charge?
Yeah, no. So
Great.
this is open source. I don't know if they make any money or not. I know they have like kind of sponsorships and API certifications that you can do, but
Yeah, I see that.
really, it's I think in a large part it's maintained and partially by the community. A lot of the new exchanges that are added by teams like us that want to get new users and new people access to Sparkswap. So we're willing to put in some work to make sure it can support it.
Wow, that's great. Very, very cool. I love to see these open source, libraries like this. It's all about open sourcing the data, and the information. So very, very cool. Let's see. Let's maybe take a look at the documentation, because you guys,
Sure.
I believe you guys have some pretty nice documentation. Maybe you can go into about what was the idea of it going behind this? Like, are you guys really passionate about providing documentation, and how complete would you guys say that your documentation is for this?
Yeah, so we think that at least right now, our primary users are developers, people that are building integrations into their own tooling, or integrating with building tools for Sparkswap, or building integrations into other tools. And so we think as engineers, it's really important for us to have really strong documentation. And in part, we were inspired a lot by L&D. I think L&D's API documentation is pretty comprehensive, and that really helped us in building out this product. And so we kind of tried to pay it forward a little bit and provide really good documentation as well. I'm sure there's more we can do, especially on kind of how everything works together. Right now, it's really focused on how to get set up and start trading with Sparkswap. But we think it's pretty good as far as getting people up and going, getting them integrated with the API, and kind of understanding at a high level, how the swaps work, how important things like order matching work. What are the transaction costs when you use this? Because there's a lot of kind of confusion about what transaction costs on the Lightning Network look like. And there's a lot of questions too about how can I make sure that this is actually an atomic swap, which I think is important. And so we try to go into detail on all of those things on there. I think most developers are probably going to spend their time on kind of the first couple sections of getting started and building an integration. But there are definitely some people who I've talked to on Discord at length about how exactly we do swaps and what our plans are and why we're not as decentralized as we could be. So there's definitely a lot of good information in there.
Awesome. So, one of our chat participants is still not satisfied, Trey, with some of the answers. So let's just get him satisfied real quick, and then we'll go on to some more questions here. Maybe some more generic questions about Lightning Network and such. But first, he says he wants to know how the deposit works to stop fake trades. Do you guys take the deposit as a fee if the trade fails? Under what conditions is the trade considered failed?
Yeah, so the way that we ensure that a trade is actually completed is we get evidence from one of the parties that the swap is completed. And we do that using actually the pre-image for the hash for the swap. And so that's kind of a way to make sure that at least both parties have seen the swap be completed. And so anything that results in that swap not being completed, whether it's one of the parties backing out or something like that, is going to result in the deposit being confiscated. We have a few other mechanisms in place, like for example, we check their availability on the Lightning Network. We check if they have channel balances that can support this transaction, and if those checks fail, then we'll go ahead and confiscate the deposit because it's clear that they're trying to spoof. But in most cases, we rely on kind of someone revealing the pre-image to the hash that corresponds with the trade as proof that they actually completed the trade. That's not foolproof. It should prevent spoofing. It doesn't necessarily prevent something like wash trading. But no, we don't take the deposit as a fee unless somebody doesn't complete the trade, and then we do. And the deposit is designed to be of the right size so that we can economically disincentivize spoofing. But it's something we'll play with over time to make sure that it doesn't happen. on the exchange. But it's a hard problem to solve, to be honest. Like when you're dealing with kind of not having people's identities and you have no custody, it's really hard to design kind of effective recourse mechanisms.
Yeah, very, very challenging, and I believe that you guys are up to that challenge. I'm hoping as a community, you can work with other people and figure this out, because this is a problem that will be figured out. There is demand for this.
Yeah.
So real quick, I know that your battery is going low there,
I
Trey.
know.
Can you give us an ETA of how much time you think you have left? Maybe 5 minutes or 2 minutes? Or 10 minutes?
Oh gosh. Well, if you give me a minute to plug in, then I can probably stay.
Oh, okay. Well, go. I can talk forever, man. So go ahead and
all right.
plug it
I'll
in.
be right back.
Yeah, no problem. So we'll get Trey plugged in there, guys, because we do have a couple more questions left from the chat, and I have a couple more questions left as well. Some of these generic questions. I want to get some, some top level questions from Trey, because obviously, he's really plugged in here into the community, into specifically Bitcoin and Lightning and cryptocurrency. So I kind of want to get maybe some of his high level ideas and opinions about where some of the things in the space are going. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe what he thinks of the financialization of Bitcoin, maybe what he thinks is the state of Bitcoin, some of these high level type of questions. So Trey, are you back with us yet?
I'm good. Yes, I'm good.
All right. Awesome, man. Awesome. See, I can talk forever, Trey. That's not a problem. Okay. So first question is coming from the chat here. He says, can we use our own LND instances in the future to make these trades, or do we have to use always have to use your particular fork of LND? And if so, could we use your fork to make normal transactions as well?
Yeah. So, good question. Eventually we would like to support people using their own instance of LND, so that from a kind of an infrastructure perspective, you can share infrastructure with other tools. But right now, the person who asked the question is absolutely right. We have a special fork. We also kind of have it bundled together, so that everything works well together, just kind of without too much user intervention. Using your own version of LND is something that requires a little more setup. So this makes it just kind of easier to get started, but we do want to support that eventually. As far as the fork, yeah, we do have a fork of LND that kind of supports our specific application. We have tried to design the fork in such a way that it has sort of minimal impact to the rest of the Lightning Network usage. So you should be able to use it for kind of anything else that you want to. Ideally, eventually our changes will get upstreamed, or at least changes that are sort of good enough for us to be able to use it will get upstreamed, and then we won't have to maintain our fork anymore, and you'll just be able to use vanilla LND. For the time being, we spend a fair amount of time maintaining that fork, making sure that every time a new version of LND is released, that we update the fork. So it's definitely right now designed to be used with Sparkswap, but over time we want to allow people to both use it for other transactions and be able to plug in their own instance of LND or another Lightning implementation.
All right, very interesting. So that sounds good. So eventually, you guys are going to possibly allow that, but it's important. It's important in these early days to really make sure you guys get the foundation, set first. And again, we have just this Bolt standard, but there are 3 implementations, that everybody's sort of trying to work with, and we're all trying to figure this out at once. So it makes sense to sort of wait and continue to build at least some of this initial framework, some of this initial groundwork, some of this initial infrastructure before we start sort of opening it up to the world. So very interesting. So let's maybe get a couple of high level questions in here from you. What do you see as the state of Lightning right now? What does it look like to you? Obviously, we know it's early and when it's maturing, but maybe you can give us from your point of view, how do you see the state of Lightning today?
Yeah, so I think when people talk about Lightning, there's kind of 2 aspects to it. One is Lightning as a technology, which certainly there's a lot of changes that are going to happen both to the individual implementations and to the protocol itself. There's a meeting happening later this year to talk about the future of the protocol and changes that should be introduced. But the kind of the technology and the functionality that's in there today works pretty well. The kind of like core pieces of Lightning, I think it's sort of notable the things that people don't talk about with Lightning. There's a lot of complaints about routing and things like that, but like for the most part, you don't see the things you used to see where nodes just crash and like lose all your funds. The kind of stability has improved significantly. And now people are talking about, ways that we can make Lightning better, make the technology better. And the kind of second half of Lightning, and I think this is an important distinction, is Lightning as a functioning mesh network. And that's where you see a lot of articles and complaints about, routing isn't good. There's not enough capacity in the network to make payments. There was some article that came out about the failure rate of Lightning payments. And all of that is related to Lightning as a mesh network, which is just going to, it's just going to take time to build up. That's like complaining about the state of the World Wide Web, 2 years after, the first web server was released. It takes time to build up that network, to build up the capacity. And especially since LND in particular has a limit on capacity right now, like it's not surprising that the network itself is not, doesn't have huge amounts of capacity. So I think the network itself is going to continue to grow. But there's already a ton of really interesting applications. And even beyond the applications that have been released, there's a ton of really good developers that are building new stuff for it. So I think we're in the early days, but this is a really interesting technology that I think has huge potential. So, I think I'm happy to be building on Lightning when I am, is the way I would say it. If I was working earlier, I think I would be frustrated every turn. And I think if I was later, then I'd probably be too late. So that's how I think about Lightning today.
Beautifully described there, Trey. But Rubini told me that it's only going to be 5 transactions forever. What's going on? Okay. For those who didn't check out the hearings, Rubini was quite hilarious on those. I recommend people check that out. And of course, it seems to stand to reason that as Lightning evolves, we're going to have increased capacity. We're going to have better routing. These things are coming and they take time. But of course, these are problems worth solving, worth working on, as a community, and there is going to be demand. So just a quick question here about staking. So somebody said, are you planning on making money by routing payments? Do you think this will be a viable way to generate a return on your staked Bitcoin? So what maybe some of your comments, what are your comments about staking? Do you see this as going to be pretty common? Can regular people just make money in the future on Lightning just by staking their Lightning and providing liquidity to the network, or providing liquidity to the network by routing by allowing by making money off of fees through their node?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we will we will route some payments, but that won't be the primary way that we make money. We'll make a little money off of it just to sort of discourage people from using it if they don't really need it. But for the most part, we're going to make our money off of fees on trades, which are going to be kind of on a different schedule than routing fees. I think I think routing is not as easy as just putting up your Bitcoin. Alex Bosworth has he does some interesting tweets on. He's probably the most prolific Lightning Network router out there, and he doesn't make very much money yet. There's not much money to be made, but I think it's not as easy as just sticking your Bitcoin in a Lightning node. You really have to kind of try. I don't think people really know yet what the best way to be a routing node is, but it's not as easy as just putting your Bitcoin out there. I don't know that it will be I think it will be an interesting way to kind of generate returns on what is otherwise idle Bitcoin. And I think that, that's going to be important certainly for our business and the Lightning Network as a whole. But I don't think it's going to be a really effective, hugely money-making project, just because the network is designed to route around, people that are charging too much. So, I think it will be an interesting use of kind of otherwise idle Bitcoin or idle Litecoin. But I wouldn't sort of be investing all my money in building up a routing empire.
Gotcha. So no routing mines out there. We're gonna have no buildings full of Lightning routers.
Maybe, but I kind of
it's hard to predict. But yeah, it's very, very interesting, and I see that too, because like you say, the network is designed to route around expensive nodes. So that's going to be very interesting to see. It's designed itself. Lightning is designed itself to have low fees and to incentivize low fees. So very, very important there. So maybe one final question for you, Trey, before we close this out. Again, sort of a high-level top question. How do you see the future of financialization of Bitcoin? How do you see that sort of playing out just in the next couple of years, or maybe beyond that? Do you see ETFs coming online next? And do you see, the next step? Does that spin the next flywheel, which spins the next flywheel? How do you see sort of the financialization of Bitcoin playing out over the next couple of years?
An ETF is something I'm not super worried about. I know a lot of people talk about the ETF, but really an ETF is just a way for regular people to get access to Bitcoin. And I think there's plenty of ways for regular people to get access to Bitcoin today. So I'm not one of those people that's overly worried about an ETF. I also think that just sort of the nature of the highly volatile, not well-regulated nature of many of the Bitcoin exchanges are going to make it a real challenge to get something like an ETF approved. But I do think Bitcoin is going to continue to be an important part of the way people think about the future of the economy. So I won't be surprised to see more hedge funds either taking a stake in cryptocurrency specific funds or in Bitcoin itself. So I think that stuff's going to continue. And really, as a company, we're making a bet on the future of cryptocurrency as kind of an important part of the economy, an important part of the financial system, and on Bitcoin in particular as being kind of a critical piece of that financial system. So I think we'll see financialization more akin to what we've already seen, which is like bigger and bigger players coming in, maybe more aggressive types of financial institutions coming in. I don't think we're going to see, some silver bullet ETF that, pumps Bitcoin by 1,000x. I don't think that would be good for the ecosystem anyway. And I think it's a pretty long shot.
Yep. It's everybody wants the moon today. But of course, in my opinion, since I'm an old school Bitcoiner, like 6,000 is the moon pretty much already.
Exactly.
Of course, we have a long way to go. But yeah, we're definitely circling close to the moon at these prices here. But it's going to be interesting to see. We spoke a little bit before the show about this. And, I just think Bitcoin's going to continue following the same patterns. I think, we're going to go sideways. We need to go more sideways for a while. We will, of course, begin stair-stepping up eventually once we go over that 200-day moving average again. Just like last time, we go sideways until we can finally capitulate enough to start rising above that 200-day average, and then of course we can start stair stepping up. That's what Bitcoin does, right? We have this huge parabolic blow off. We correct. We have a sideways market, a bear market. We go sideways for a while until we can start stair stepping, and then of course another parabolic blow off.
Well, and for me, I think that it's really about making sure that we can build a new financial system using this technology. I think when we saw in the last kind of bull market, it's a lot of people trying to kind of port over the old financial system into this one. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I would prefer to kind of have the rails in place, things like Lightning Network that can kind of that can build a better version of what we already have, rather than just kind of like port over the old financial system with a new ticker symbol next to the asset. So I'm excited more about kind of the technology that's being built right now than the price.
Absolutely. As I like to say, Wall Street wants Bitcoin, but Bitcoin doesn't need Wall Street. So very, very good points. We just got to diversify, Trey. We'll just listen to all the hedge fund managers and we'll just diversify into all of these coins because they're all the same, right? We got a bundle from Coinbase, bundling ETC right next to BTC. Got to be close to the same thing, right? So looking forward to getting more education out there, from some of the financialization. There's going to be some financialization, but man, are we years away from the market understanding what Bitcoin is and really the main differences between Bitcoin and these other coins. But of course, that can only come with time. There's going to be a lot of people. They're going to write a lot of theses on why having multiple coins is good and all that good stuff. So we're gonna see how it all plays out. Really appreciate you coming on the show, Trey. Really thank you a lot, man. Some interesting technology that you are building. And I hope people learned a little bit today from our conversation. Very interesting conversation to me. I love having these conversations about Bitcoin, Lightning, the future, as we continue to build it today. And of course, as companies like yours continue to build on what hopefully will be the future. Of the rails of the next financial network. So again, Trey, thank you so much, guys. Thank you, everybody in the chat. We had some great questions coming from you guys. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We really hope you guys had a good time. We were live here on the CryptoCast Network. We have live shows all the time, but of course, those always eventually get transferred over to the audio stream, I think within about 24 hours after we air. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We have much more shows, guys, coming down the pipeline on this channel. We have, of course, the Bitcoin News Show every Sunday at noon, and we got more shows coming over after that. We'll have a new Bitcoin Matters soon, and of course we have another crypto Q&A next Thursday. We skipped that this week because the host was traveling. Heidi was traveling, but we will bring that back. So again, guys, thanks so much for joining. We had a great time. Until next time, guys, just keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you later.
Thanks.